Hello and welcome to this edition of Talk Time. I'm Paranjoy Guha-Thakurta in the studio of Lok Sabha Television here in New Delhi, and in this edition of the program we are going to look at how the police in India needs to be reformed. Yes, we've been talking about reforming the police force for years and years, but very little progress has been made. Why has so little progress been made in reforming the way our police personnel work? That's the first issue, because good policing is critical, it's crucial to ensuring that women are safe. There's a hue and cry across this country on what needs to be done after the terrible gang rape of a young woman in Delhi on the 16th of December. But good policing is an integral part of ensuring that women are more secure in this country. And related to these issues is the whole issue of how to make the police more gender sensitive. To discuss these issues and related issues, let me welcome the guests who are here with me in the studio. I'm very happy to have with me right here, Ms. Nawaz Kotwal. Ms. Kotwal is a coordinator of the Police Reforms Initiative of Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, which is an international civil society organization which is looking at what needs to be done to make systemic changes in the way the police in this country work. A lawyer by profession, has a degree in law from the Government Law College in Mumbai. Thank you, Ms. Kotwal, for coming here. With us here is Mr. Jacob Punus. He retired recently as the Director General of Police of Kerala. He belongs to the 1975 batch of the Indian Police Service. He served more than 3.5 decades in the police force, and he's also been he was also the chairman of the Kerala Police Act Review Committee. He was the City Police Commissioner of Thiruvananthapuram. Thank you, Mr. Jacob Punus, for coming here to our studio. Let me start with you, Ms. Nawaz Kotwal. In September 2006, the Supreme Court ruled in what has now become a well-known judgment of Prakash Singh, who was himself a former Director General of Police and the Union of India, that fairly wide-ranging reforms need to be initiated. But these require to be done by various states. Many argue that over the last 6.5, almost 7 years since that judgment was delivered, very little has changed on the ground, and our police force, despite innumerable committees, their recommendations, continues to work in a manner which is not suited to today's day and age. Your views on the big picture when it comes to reforming the police in India?
Yeah, the Supreme Court gave its judgment in September 2006, and on that date it gave a 3-month time period for implementation. So it was not, a lot of states had objections, passed several affidavits saying that they were not agreeable to some of the directives that were being passed, but the Supreme Court said nothing doing. Within 3 months you have to implement all the 6 directions. Now the 6 directions were towards the states and the 7th directed towards the center. It's been almost, as you say, almost 7 years since the judgment was passed, and you could say that almost all states have blatantly disobeyed what the courts said. The court's 6 directives were almost like a package deal. So it was identified the problems of policing as too much political interference, too little accountability, and very little professionalism within the police. So to address these directives, to address these problems, the 6 directives were laid down. And considering that the directives would loosen the politicians' control over the police, make the police more accountable, there was resistance from both these important players in the police reform battle. So the politicians resisted because they would lose that control. The police resisted because they would subject themselves to one more layer of accountability.
Stop here for the moment. Let me bring in Mr. Jacob Punus into our discussion. How important is the resistance of the political class, the representatives of the people, the elected representatives of the people, their, in a sense, refusal, if you like, to make the police autonomous of politicians? responsible for the current state of affairs that we find ourselves. I mean, it's very fashionable sometimes to blame politicians for everything that's gone wrong with our country. But let's also keep in mind that they are elected by the people of this country. They are representing the people of this country. Should we hold them largely responsible for what is going wrong as far as policing is concerned or reforming the police is concerned?
I would hold that the present day politician has inherited a police system. Way back in 1902, there was a commission appointed by the British government. Almost all the ills of the current Indian police were there in full measure at that time.
So it's more than a century, you're saying, and nothing is changing.
So the ills of the Indian police were not created by the contemporary politician. Where the contemporary politician has failed is in changing what he inherited from the British. And there has been resistance both from the police side as well as from the political executive side. Most probably because the issues were not in focus. What happened after the Prakash Singh judgment of the Supreme Court is that these issues were focused. 7 issues were highlighted by the Supreme Court. As a result, as Ms. Kotwal has said, several states have not done anything. Some states have done half measures. In my states, there has been a significant improvement in the quality.
Why would you say that? Is it because the political class, irrespective of their ideology, you know, we know in Kerala we have the left and then we have the Congress or the LDF and the UDF. Are you saying that there is a certain amount of consensus among politicians in your state that has made the difference? No,
that made some difference, and we have a police act. We have a new police act in which a large number of the pronouncements of the Supreme Court have been brought into effect. We have also significantly traversed a large number of areas which were not mentioned in the Supreme Court judgment also. What we must understand is that we are not opposing political control of the police. What we are opposing is political interference in the day-to-day functioning of the police.
How would you like to split hairs? Is there a difference between political control and political interference, as Mr. Jacob Punus is trying to draw a distinction? I mean, at the end of the day, the relationship between the elected representatives and the police, the law enforcing authorities, is not such a easily definable relationship. But let's put it this way, in a democracy, the elected representatives believe that they, in a sense, have an upper hand. And for reasons that have got to do with the way the polity and our society is structured, they believe at the end of the day, the police should be answerable to the elected representatives. Now, how do you really draw that distinction between the police being answerable to the political leadership and the interference of the political leadership in the day-to-day working of the police?
Absolutely, that's a very good point. And considering that the police themselves is a very, very powerful force, you don't want to completely give them independence or autonomy. So what originally was said, give the police autonomy, is now being replaced by saying let the police have the operational responsibility and let the politician have the supervision over them. So let the politician frame the policies, frame the guidelines, but then give the police the operational responsibility or even the operational independence to implement those policies. So day-to-day functioning of the police should be left to the police, but when it comes to policy setting, yes, that is the role of the politician.
All right. Now, I'm asking you another question, Nawaz, and that is that the right to transfer is a very important right, or the right to appoint and transfer, which the politician doesn't want to give up. How important is this right, and how does it matter? I mean, or does it really matter that the politician should have the last word as to where a particular police officer should be, stationed at a particular point of time?
No, he should not, because it is the immediate superior. It is the chief of police who knows his particular officer, and he knows where he's best suited to be placed. And the Supreme Court also in its directive recognized that this was a big problem of policing. Transfer is a weapon in the hands of the politician. And that's why it set up a police establishment board, which it said would comprise of 4 senior most officers. And this board would look at the transfers, promotions, postings of all officers up to the level of superintendent of police, and give suggestions, recommendations for transfers above the superintendent of police, which shall ordinarily be accepted by the government.
Mr. Jacob Punus, you see, in any democracy, the ultimate responsibility for ensuring law and order and security of the populace does rest with the representative of the police. I mean, if anybody gets the flag, okay, as police chief you get flag, but the Home Minister thinks that he is really where the buck stops. Yes. So the question that would now be, what is the relative jurisdiction? Where are the lines on the sand? Where do they have to be drawn? What is that dividing line between interference and control?
And the line exists, though the distinction is quite thin, the line does exist. The difference comes in, the Home Minister does not decide whom to arrest, whom not to arrest, which case to charge sheet, which case not to charge sheet. These kind of matters are to be decided by the police professional in the light of the evidence, in the light of the investigation done. It is not a question of political choice. Where the individual citizen's freedom is in question, then the freedom has to be controlled, that the police freedom has to be controlled by the politician in a way that police do not act against the law. Police do not carry out any oppression against the citizen.
Okay.
That comes within the Home Minister's.
You know, I was reading this note that had been prepared by the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. One of the points is that there should be no direction from the Minister to the Director General of Police that could have an effect of requiring the non-enforcement of a particular area of law. Yeah. So it's not just the enforcement, it's also the non-enforcement that matters.
Yeah. The law, once it is enacted by the Parliament and the State Assembly, must be enforced by the police. Now, nobody has got a discretionary right to say the law should not be enforced. So, this political control does not mean a discretion on whether a law should be enforced or not.
And the further recommendations are the enforcement of the criminal law in particular cases and classes of cases and matters that relate to an individual or a group of individuals or decisions on individual members of police. Most politicians will say that this is like, I mean, giving up his powers completely, making him into an ineffective minister.
No, clearly not, because effective ministers, when police are given a power to conduct an investigation, to enforce a law, it is the Home Minister's responsibility to ensure that they do not convert that into a means to oppress the population.
Okay.
That they don't carry out illegal arrests, that they don't torture people, that they don't become a law unto themselves.
All right.
These are within the preserves of the Home Minister.
Okay. I'm going to get back to you, Nawaz. I mean, maybe you'd like to comment on some of the points that have been made by Jacob Punus. But we also need to move on and we talk about why good policing is important for security of women in particular. And we have a look at some of the issues that have been raised after that brutal gang rape of this young woman in Delhi on the 16th of December and the recommendations of the Justice J.S. Verma committee, which are being debated in the country at present. So I get back to both of you. We take a short break in our discussion and we return to you in a short while from now. Stay with us. Welcome back to our discussion, which looks at how the police need to be reformed, how the police needs to be made more gender sensitive, and how good policing is a very, very integral aspect of ensuring greater security for women in this country. With me here in the studio of Lok Sabha Television, I have Ms. Nawaz Kotwal, coordinator of the Police Reforms Program of the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative, and Mr. Jacob Punus, former Director General of Police in Kerala. Ms. Kotwal, you know, the point is that this balance between legitimate supervision of the police by the political executive and what you might describe as not so legitimate or even illegitimate influence, interference. You know, I mean, we are here treading on very, very, sort of gray area, the dividing line between what is good superintendence, good control, and, what is clearly interference. And, I'd like you to sort of elaborate on the basis of what we've discussed. How do you ensure that superintendence takes place and not interference? And I mean, can you do this? I mean, what are the best practices to ensure that this actually happens? Yes.
It is like we've said before. It is a very fine line, and several commissions of the National Police Commission, several other commissions that have sat on police reform in the last so many decades have discussed this issue, have suggested very concrete recommendations, and those recommendations distilled into what the Supreme Court directive that they passed in September 2006. The directive which they passed, which was of course based, it was setting up a state security commission, and this commission model of supervision and control over the police is a model that has worked in other countries. It has in the UK it is known as the tripartite model, which has now of course been replaced by a different system since 2012. It has worked in New South Wales, and it has been put into their statutes itself, defining very clearly what the role of the chief of police should be, what the role of the minister in charge of policing should be, and where there is a conflict, then how that needs to be resolved.
Okay, how that needs to be resolved, and how all complaints need to go through certain procedures, and any minister shouldn't have the right to do anything they like with the police. They should go through the Home Minister and so on and so forth. But before I move on to Mr. Jacob Punus, I want you to talk about one other aspect, this whole issue of police complaints authorities. This is one of the recommendations of the Supreme Court. But what has been the experience in India? Because your civil society organization has been argued that they've not been well designed in India. They've not been particularly effective. They've been badly provisioned, and therefore the systems haven't worked. If you could briefly touch on that subject.
See, the court suggested a particular model. It said that these complaints authorities should be set up at the state level as well as the district level. It was supposed to be a local remedy to people who had complaints against the police. So it was devoid of all the complexities that a court would have. Just a person could come up, complain against the police. The court suggested that there should be a particular composition, there should be a particular selection process, and they would have a fixed mandate. They would be full-time bodies with the power to hire independent investigators. None of this has been followed by almost every state, because it is subjecting the police to an external accountability mechanism.
And this is being resisted both by the police?
Both by the police
as well
as by the politician, because it's like a give and take. If I don't want to give up my control over the police, then the police's demand would also be that don't subject us to so much accountability.
Okay. Mr. Punus, so in other words, what she's suggesting, and what many others would suggest, is that there is indeed a deep-rooted nexus between the higher echelons of the police department and the politicians. And it suits both to ensure the absence of accountability. No, and therefore, these same complaints, the police complaints authorities, have been rendered ineffective.
But complaints authorities, only Kerala has got both at the district level as well as at the state level. We have enacted the legislation necessary for this. These authorities have been constituted, they have started functioning, and initially so far their functioning has been encouraging.
But would you not agree that Kerala has been an exception perhaps in this regard?
In many states, depends upon the level of political development, social development, cultural development in every state. In every state in India differs from every other state, and therefore what has been the Kerala experience has been really encouraging. I am not claiming that it is perfect, but it is encouraging, and we are working on how to better this, how to better the performance of the complaint authorities.
How would you make some suggestions?
No, because these authorities have to function for some time to find out, for us to find out the practical difficulties, and when these practical difficulties are encountered, we can move towards rectifying them. Now, large number of complaints are coming to the district complaint authorities, but very few complaints are coming to the state authorities, because state authority look into the officers of and above the rank of superintendent of police. So, large number of complaints are coming to district authorities.
At the lower level?
At the lower level. So, how to make it more effective is a problem it's a challenge which we have to face. And because they have been functioning only for 2 or 3 years now. And recently we have strengthened, the structure has been strengthened by addition of independent members also.
Nawaz, would you say that the Kerala experience has been very different from that of other states? And would you say, and would you go along with his view, with Mr. Jacob Punis's view, that it perhaps has something to do with the nature of Kerala society? We know Kerala was one of the first states, or if not the first state in India, to become fully literate in terms of its human development indicators. It's been ahead of many and most other states in India, I would perhaps in certain respects, all other states in India. So has it got a lot to do with Kerala society?
Yeah, I would say Kerala can easily be considered as an exception.
Now,
you can't really, yeah. So, but the same situation doesn't exist in say anywhere, northern India, central India, western India. It doesn't exist. In fact, the bigger states like Maharashtra, Karnataka, West Bengal, they have resisted the setting up of these complaints authorities like tooth and nail. None of the big states have set up complaints authorities, in fact. So it's so clear that there is a much more stronghold of the politicians there, and there's much more power that the police have there, where they are resisting all the reforms that have been introduced. But also, as Mr. Punnu said, we have to wait and see how the authorities are functioning, and then suggest what changes you need to make. But also, this is a model. External oversight model has been looked at, experimented in several countries. There are certain basics or certain fundamentals at this stage you need to like inject into these authorities so that they start functioning properly. If at the inception stage itself they're so badly structured, they're so badly funded, they're not independent, they have to depend on the government for every rupee that is to be spent, then you're not going to be able to get any public to come to you, to have confidence in this authority, and that the authority will slowly grow. Because at this stage, if you're going to cripple it so much, it's never going to be able to walk on its own.
Mr. Jacob Punnu, as you rightly pointed out, perhaps in certain respects Kerala has moved ahead of other parts of India.
Yes.
But Kerala too has had a not so great track record. There have been these terrible accusations and rather high profile cases involving, examples of police high-handedness and worse, and these have happened in the regimes of both the Congress-led United Democratic Front government as well as the Communist Party of India Marxist-led Left and Democratic Front. And in many cases we have number of examples of the police being misused, not used but misused by those who are in a position of power at a particular point of time. So I want you to sort of examine again how do you really draw that distinction between what you might describe, to use a note that they've given, appropriate political direction from a government, an elected government, and inappropriate political interference.
As I said, I do not claim that Kerala experience has been perfect. There have been failings, there have been defects. But the important thing to note is that whenever any failing has come to notice, that has been acted upon. Very serious action has been taken against police officers who have misbehaved with the public, or accusations have been come against police officers. In all those cases, very serious action has been initiated against police officers. That has been happening in Kerala right for the past 30-40 years. It has been happening. Now, what we have done is, we have now a State Security Commission in which the Chief Minister, in which the Home Minister as well as the Leader of Opposition are members. In very many states this has not happened. For the Chief Minister or the Home Minister to sit across the board with the Leader of Opposition and be in the State Security Commission. Now, that has happened in Kerala. In very many matters, broad policy guidelines are agreed upon. Some of our major policy initiatives like community policing, student police cadre, this has across the political spectrum. All political parties are supporting it without any distinction whether it is the ruling party or the opposition party. So, this kind of awareness that what is good for the people, for example, the premise that every citizen should be able to enter a police station without fear, that is a test of his freedom.
Whereas in large parts of the country, as I'm sure Nawaz will agree, people are scared of the police, extremely scared of registering a first information report, especially women. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. And even by their some of the more notorious states have a very low registration of crime, while some of where there is good policing, you would say there is a higher registration of crime.
Okay.
And I think the media has a role to play in portraying this image of the police, as well as in portraying this negative image of crime registration.
All right.
Because the moment crime, there is the NCRB report which comes up on crime statistics, and then there is flashed all across the media that a particular state there's a 40% increase in crimes against women. What needs to be shown is that crime is always there. It's not that any police have, it's just that the registration of crime has increased, and that would mean that there is public confidence in going to the police station and recording and registering your complaint.
Let me stop you here, Nawaz. This is a subject I want you to talk about in greater detail, in greater depth. We want to look at good policing, effective policing, and ensuring safety and security for women. Let's look at this issue in greater detail, and let's look ahead at what needs to be done. Let's look at what are the recommendations that have been made in the Justice Verma Committee, by the Justice Verma Committee, on ensuring that effective policing takes place in a manner that it enhances the security of women. Mr. Punus, I'm also going to get back to you on the same subject. We take one more break in our program. We are kind of halfway through our discussion, and in the remaining half of our program, let's discuss this issue of how do you sensitize the police force. We'll be back with you in a short while from now. We are looking at what needs to be done to make the police in this country far more gender sensitive. We'll be back with you. Stay with us. Welcome back to our discussion on reforming the police, and in particular we are going to look at why good policing is so essential, so vital to ensure security of women. With me here in the studio of Lok Sabha Television, I have Ms. Nawaz Kotwal of the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative and Mr. Jacob Punus, former Director General of Police of Kerala. Ms. Nawaz Kotwal, when we talk about ensuring that the police gets far more sensitive to issues concerning women, what would you flag, what according to you are the key concerns in this regard? Is it the number of women who are policemen, or is it the overall mindset of all police personnel, including women who are in the police department?
I think it's a mix of both. If you look at the